Mr Chair.
Call Michael Wood.
Mr Chair, I'm very happy to take the call on the Land Transport Amendment number 2 bill, and particularly pleased this is my first opportunity to speak in this debate as Labour's new transport spokesperson. I didn't, and can I just, in introducing that point, acknowledge the work that my colleague Sue Moroney has done in this role, but also on the Select Committee and working constructively on the progress of this bill. And Mr Chair, I'd like to take a few calls on the bill this evening. There are lots of quite important points to cover off here. The Labour Party's position on this bill is that we support many of the measures within it, but we do have some real concerns that we want to flag up and have some engagement with the Minister on the Chair on. And the one that I want to touch on in my first contribution relates to the provisions in this bill, and we're talking about clause 58 here, which remove requirements to have identification information in Braille in small passenger vehicles. And I want to reflect on some of the things that we heard in Select Committee about this and really dig into why we haven't been able to see some proactive and sensible and pragmatic changes made to the legislation through that Select Committee process in response to those concerns. And Mr Chair, this really goes to, I guess, probably the heart of Labour's concerns about some of the deregulatory aspects around small passenger vehicles that come through in this bill. We're a party that supports sensible public good regulation. We always have to be careful when we're regulating that we don't get into the territory of being overburdensome, but we have public good regulation to protect the public good. And what we had in Select Committee in respect of this issue was, I thought, a number of very good submissions, including one from the Blind Citizens of New Zealand. And I couldn't really put it better myself. And they make the point that they see real potential through the introduction of ride-sharing services like Uber. They're not anti-Uber at all. They think it's a good service that offers opportunities for the people that they represent. They go further, and I'll quote directly from them here. They say, "We urge caution to ensure that there are no serious and perhaps unforeseen consequences for people who are most dependent on such services for their everyday transport, who may also be amongst the most vulnerable. We are deeply concerned that the overall thrust of the changes, as explained in the explanatory note to the bill, is, quote, to remove regulatory requirements that impose costs on operators but no longer offer any significant benefits." And what they go on to say in their submission is that they do believe, as one of the bodies that represents the interests of vision-impaired people, that there are significant benefits in terms of having that Braille identification in small passenger vehicles. And Mr Chair, what we really haven't heard from the government through the course of the committee stage debate or any other stage is why this relatively non-onerous piece of public good regulation has been removed. And in this respect, I want to speak to the supplementary order paper that's put forward by Sue Moroney. It's a supplementary order paper number 346, which seeks to directly address this issue. And it's very simple. It means that in the legislation and in the bill here, and we're looking at page 36 of the Bar 2 bill.
Order. Sorry to interrupt the member, but just to, for the purposes of transparency, the supplementary order papers that are in relation to that the member Sue Moroney has put forward are out of order because they are in an intangible or not a fixed date. Discussions around Uber and what regulations should be imposed on them. So discussion about what they want to do is fine and totally in scope, but they will be ruled out of order come voting time, just to let you know.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Well, if I can continue on in this vein, it will be really good to hear from the Minister on the Chair on the substantive point that we're talking about in respect of clause 58 of the bill here, which is why there has been such reluctance from the government to listen to this point. And while the SOP might be out of order, I do note that in the explanatory note, we heard in Select Committee that in fact the provision of this Braille signage is actually very cheap, possibly about $20 per vehicle. So it does seem to be a relatively non-onerous thing that we could do to ensure the safety and comfort of vision-impaired people. In the short time I've got, actually the frozen time I've got in the remainder of this call, I'd just like to just address a very, very specific point I picked up in terms of one of the changes that was introduced by the Select Committee, and I'd like to come back to some other calls a little bit later. And this, sir, is on page 42 of the bill. We're looking at clause 80 here, and it's a definition of moped. And I have a particular interest in this because I'm the proud owner of a nice little 1998 Honda Giorno. It's more sort of held together by duct tape and things these days. I probably wouldn't want the Land Transport authorities looking too closely at it. But ensuring that, that those vehicles are roadworthy and ridden in accordance with the rules of the road is very important. Of course, they're an extremely useful addition to our vehicle fleet, particularly in our congested cities. The question that I've got is we've got a very Clause 81 introduces, through a select committee change, a new definition of moped. And here we've got number A has 2 or 3 wheels. Well, we understand that's an accurate thing to say. C says an engine cylinder capacity not exceeding 50cc. And 50cc has always been the standard definition of what separates a moped from a motorcycle, you know, the baby vehicle from the growing up one. 50cc is the cut-off point, so we know that that's right. And a power source other than a piston engine. Effectively, a moped is a lawnmower that you ride around on the roads. But it's 1B that I just want to question and perhaps get to the Minister and the Chair just to respond to. It says a maximum speed not exceeding 50 kilometres per hour. And this is important. This is part of the definition of a moped in this piece of legislation. Every moped that I'm familiar with has a maximum speed of more than 50 kilometres an hour. The maximum speed a moped is lawfully allowed to drive on the road is 50 kilometres per hour, but the maximum speed of a moped is generally far more than 50 kilometres an hour. So it would just be helpful to check through the Minister that we're confident that definition of moped is not going to, through a loose use of language, create potential definitional issues when we get to the implementation of this legislation further on down the track. I'll wind up my call there, Mr Chair, but be very keen to take a few more calls later on in this debate. Thank you, sir.
Pini Henare.
Excellent, Mr Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity.